talking to some wonderful old variety acts, from the golden age of variety, is always fascinating because you find out about acts that now we've completely forgotten about. I mentioned recently, didn't I, the story about the Billy Cotton Band Show and how that was a pivotal point in so many British people's lives on a Sunday lunchtime. The smell of gravy, your mum's roast potatoes, the peas bubbling away, the carrots ready, and that sign of wakey wakey on the radio told you that this wonderful show was about to start. People remember, say, Billy Cotton, and perhaps, when you think about it, it's generational. For many of us of our era, I remember as a child watching things like Morecambe and Wise, Mike and Bernie Winters, Dick Emery, all of that. When I spoke to a young person that I worked with, and I say young person, like 31, they got no idea about Dick Emery. They barely knew Morecambe and Wise. You see how the time moves on. It's strange, isn't it, when you think? Because, of course, in our minds, they're still relevant, they're still funny, and they're still great. What's interesting here, though, is this, because consequently there was a man that was assigned in many respects to bringing, the sort of royals into disrepute on the variety stage, and sadly failed to make the right impression, and now is all but forgotten. As ever, let me explain. Morning, chums, lovely to see you. Welcome back, one and all, and thank you for enjoying these warm, nostalgic memories of times gone by that I like to share with you. It's a nice, change of pace from all the other stories that we're surrounded by in the world, and it's good to look back, particularly on these dark winter nights. If you're watching it, you think, oh, I might watch that, or yes, I remember that, or something like that. The other day on television, I saw a terrific film, and I've seen it before, and I think we had it when we were allowed to do the matinees, called Scandal Sheet with Broderick Crawford. What an actor, what a film. And if you put it in today's context, still the same. You see what I mean? Nothing changes, does it? It's a bit like this particular act that I stumbled across, all thanks to interviewing a former variety artist who's now well into their 80s, but just wonderful, full of stories, incredible when you think, because they were a big star. This guy was called Afreak. And the thing is, he was, how can you put this nicely? He was a developing sort of, star, for want of a better word, right? The thing is, he came over to London and got on at the infamous Windmill Theatre. And according to the sort of folklore, the boss of the Windmill Theatre, Vivian Van Dam, thought, well, he was, of course, a coloured gentleman, and he came on with a spear, dressed in leopard skin, and did some sort of things about, jungle noises and stuff. But Vivian Van Dam could see something in him. He was also a trained opera singer, wonderful, powerful voice. And once he started to sing, everybody stopped and thought, this is really what you should be doing. So they developed the act. But on top of that, he was able to become a great mimic. Now, you have to remember, this is an era of the mimicry where it suddenly took off, because radio had started in the 1930s, and suddenly you could hear people, so you could mimic their voices. Now, what was interesting about this particular story, when you think, is obviously, that people talk about, do you remember the Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, right? And they had a big show called That Was the Week That Was. And everybody says that actually on that show, it was the period when Harold Macmillan was spoofed and ridiculed and mocked on national television for the very first time. Well, that's absolutely not technically true, because this man, as I say, the stage name of Afreak, but really he was called Alexandra. The idea really was he'd mimicked the then Prince of Wales, yes, the Duke of Windsor, and this went down an absolute storm. I mean, people loved it. Remember, they've now heard him speak in newsreels, heard him speak on the radio. So for somebody to go on the stage like the Holborn Empire or, the London Palladium and mimic the royal was seen as controversial. Shock. I can't begin to tell you how shocking this act was, according to that former artiste. He said, people were like, how dare you do this? Because he wasn't rude or anything like that, but the voice was spot on, apparently. Now, this got back to the then Prince of Wales, who apparently really liked it. But then very quickly behind the scenes, the Lord Chamberlain, which was of course the boss of what you could do and what you couldn't do on the stage and on the screen, basically told him to stop because the royals didn't like it. Now, apparently, according to this guy, the royals loved it. In fact, the Prince of Wales thought this was great because suddenly it's making more accessible, people are liking him, and he could take a good joke, right? But as I said, this was the way it was presented to him was, you'll never get invited to the royal variety if you continue to do this impression in your act. And he did many different people, you know, the beautiful voice of Richard Tober, Paul Robeson, people like that. But this was the big star thing. He stopped doing it and his career plummeted. Now, what was interesting was he never made it to the Royal Variety performance, and many people suspected that in fact somebody behind the royal circles thought this was disrespectful. But very quickly, not only did he not make it to the Royal Variety, he went down in decline, popularity, and then sadly got into gambling debts. And this, of course, is a man who was, many people said, mocked the royals in a very nice, gentle way for the very first time, not just on stage, but on the wireless too. Apparently, one royal liked it, but according to the Lord Chamberlain, others didn't. But now he's all but forgotten, apart from today, when we're remembering him. Neil Sean, Kensington, London.